It was supposed to be a peaceful Sunday, the kind of morning where time moves slowly and the world feels calm. At least, that's what I thought, until my daughter, Sarah, found herself staring down a man with a gun pointed at her head. There she was, sweat glistening on her brow, her running shoes digging into the dirt, that trademark smirk of hers playing on her lips like she was trying to decide whether to laugh or break this guy in half. 5 seconds. That's all it took. 5 seconds before the neighbors realized something wasn't right. It all started because the homeowners association, with their desperate need for control, had decided to hire a self-proclaimed sheriff with more ego than sense to patrol our streets. 2 months ago, Sarah and I had moved to Cedar Grove Estates, a seemingly perfect suburban neighborhood. Spacious lots, rolling green fields, the kind of place where peace should be a given. Sarah, a retired Marine Corps instructor, was adjusting to civilian life. Her mornings now consisted of jogging along the community trails and tending to our garden, far removed from the chaos of military life. Little did I know that peace was fleeting, not with Vince Malone patrolling the streets. Vince rolled through in a beat-up SUV plastered with fake police stickers, wearing sunglasses that made him look like he'd just stepped out of a B-grade action flick. Old Mr. Larson warned me about him early on, shaking his head over a cup of coffee. "Watch Vince," he said. "Thinks he's a lawman. Acts like it, too." I brushed it off as an old man's paranoia, but I should have listened. I was wrong. That morning, as the skies shimmered with the early light, Sarah laced up her shoes and headed out for her jog. I stayed on the porch, sipping my coffee, unaware that everything was about to change. 20 minutes later, the screech of tires cut through the air. Shouts. Chaos. My coffee sloshed as I bolted down the driveway, heart hammering in my chest. A crowd had gathered at the trailhead, and there was Sarah, as calm as a seasoned soldier, facing Vince, who, in a scene straight out of a bad cop movie, waved a gun around. "Show ID now," he barked, his voice shaky. "You're trespassing. Suspicious." Sarah's eyes narrowed, but there was no fear, only fire. "And if I don't," she shot back, "what are you going to do, deputy dog?" Vince's grip tightened on the gun, knuckles white. The crowd gasped. Phones came out. My heart pounded in my chest, but I knew Sarah was trained for moments like this. She stepped forward, her hands raised just enough to seem harmless. "You sure you want to point that at me, Vince?" she asked softly, her voice ice cold. "You sure you won't make a mistake you can't undo?" His hand twitched. In a flash, Sarah was on him, twisting his wrist with precision and disarming him in a heartbeat. She popped the magazine out, ripped the gun apart, and let the pieces fall to the ground like broken dreams. The crowd erupted in cheers, some even clapping. Vince stood there, staring at the scattered gun parts like they betrayed him. Sarah dusted her hands, a smirk curling on her lips. "Call your boss," she taunted. "Oh, wait, you don't have one." By the time the sheriff's deputies arrived, they were laughing and shaking Sarah's hand. Vince was humiliated, but the HOA wasn't amused. Mrs. Caldwell, the president of the board, strutted in, perfume wafting through the air like a cloud of desperation. She begged Sarah not to press charges, pleading for the community's reputation. She offered Sarah a year's worth of free dues, as if that would solve everything. Sarah smiled sweetly. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice calm, but I saw the flicker of something else in her eyes. It wasn't peace. It was strategy. The HOA, Vince, and all those who thought they'd seen the last of Sarah didn't know what they'd just triggered. They hadn't seen the war coming. Sarah didn't rush into action. No, she was a strategist. Chess, not checkers. After disarming Vince, she casually finished her jog, tossing me a grin as she returned. "We're going to have fun with this," she said. And I didn't ask. I knew that look. I'd seen it before during her Marine days. She was plotting something, and it wasn't going to be quick. For days, she played the part of relaxed, friendly neighbor, jogging, chatting with others. But underneath that calm exterior, she was gathering intel. Her questions were sharp, like the edge of a blade. How long had Vince been patrolling? Who funded him? How were fines issued? With each conversation, she learned more. Vince wasn't a volunteer. He was a hired hand, paid directly from a resident's dues, with no background check, no oversight, just a fake badge and a loaded ego. Sarah needed hard proof. One night, we went out. We planted hidden cameras at the trailhead, the clubhouse, and the HOA office. The adrenaline rush was real, like we were on a covert mission. Within days, the footage began to roll in, Vince bullying a teenage cyclist, accusing him of endangering safety. Another video showed him threatening a mother over birthday balloons, demanding she pay a $500 fine or face punishment. The footage made my blood boil, but Sarah? She stayed as cool as ice. "This is gold," she said, saving the videos to her laptop. But that wasn't enough. She wasn't just going to expose Vince. She was after the entire corrupt HOA board, posing as an eager new resident. Sarah charmed her way into a board meeting. Over stale donuts, the board spilled their secrets. The dues were funneled to Vince's patrol through a beautification fund. His gas, his uniform, even his badge were covered. All from the residents' money. No vote, no transparency. One night, Sarah recorded Mrs. Caldwell plotting to bury us in violations until we gave up and moved. They had labeled Sarah a troublemaker and Mia a pushover. Sarah sat back, a smile creeping across her face. "They think they can bully us," she said later, looking over the footage. "They have no idea who they're messing with." This wasn't just about Vince anymore. This was bigger. This was about taking down the entire corrupt system, piece by piece. And Sarah was building her case like a fortress. Videos, photos, a flowchart tracing every penny of the dues to Vince's pocket. Meanwhile, Vince thought he had us. He smirked as he cruised past our house, his mind convinced that Sarah had been cowed. What he didn't realize was that he was walking straight into her trap. And Sarah? She was waiting. The board's closed-door meetings were nothing more than a failed attempt to salvage what little dignity they had left. The neighbors were no longer afraid, their silence shattered. Every time the HOA tried to intimidate us, Sarah responded with a quiet, lethal precision. Another violation notice arrived, claiming our event was unauthorized, despite the fact it was listed in their own newsletter. Sarah laughed, adding it to her ever-growing file of evidence. Then came a legal threat, accusing us of defamation. Sarah's reply? A letter quoting whistleblower laws, along with a copy of the DA complaint she'd mailed, complete with mocking smirk. But the harassment didn't stop. Our mailbox was knocked over. Trash was dumped in our yard. Threatening notes, scrawled in childish handwriting, turned up in the most unexpected places. Yet Sarah was always one step ahead. Her cameras caught the teens Vince had paid to vandalize our property. They cracked under pressure and confessed. Vince found himself facing conspiracy charges. Sarah wasn't done. She sent the updated evidence to every possible outlet, including the state HOA regulator. The walls were closing in. It was then that the HOA board called a community unity meeting. They thought they could spin the narrative, manipulate the room, and rally the neighbors against us. But Sarah had already anticipated every move. We sat front row, watching Mrs. Caldwell's smile slowly falter as a reporter quoted financial misdeeds and shady dealings. The room grew tense, and the crowd turned on her. "Resign!" someone shouted. Then another joined in, followed by more voices. It was like a tidal wave. "Resign!" the chant echoed, and it rattled the walls. Mrs. Caldwell, the woman who had paraded around with such arrogance, fled the meeting, collapsing in shame. Neighbors began to make plans for a recall, and Sarah, with a smile playing on her lips, predicted every step. "He's done this before," she said, referring to Vince. "Scammed other HOAs, racked up lawsuits. They'll be next." The recall vote was swift. Mrs. Caldwell and 4 other board members were ousted, replaced by honest neighbors who had the best interests of Cedar Grove at heart. An audit followed, exposing the slush fund the board had been hiding, and the unlicensed patrols were banned. Mrs. Caldwell, with nowhere else to go, sold her house and left quietly, not even mourned by the very community she tried to control. Life began to normalize. Children played on the streets again. Flags fluttered in the wind. Fear evaporated. At a community cookout, Mr. Jenkins, an old veteran, raised his glass and praised Sarah for saving Cedar Grove. "With heart and brains," he said. The applause that followed was deafening. Sarah, ever humble, blushed but waved it off. She never sought the spotlight. Later, as we sat on the porch, she leaned back and said, "Fighting isn't about being the loudest. It's about refusing to quit." A month later, we stood together at a dedication ceremony for a new park. A plaque was unveiled, honoring the community's resilience. It read, "A community thrives when its people stand together." Sarah stood there, watching the neighbors laugh and chat, content with the way things had turned out. Then came the unexpected gift, a sign that read, "Cedar Grove thanks Sarah," which they hung proudly by our garden. She didn't brag about it. Instead, she planted sunflowers, their faces reaching toward the sky, basking in the sunlight. Newcomers, curious about the legend of the jogger who toppled a tyrannical HOA, asked the neighbors for stories. Old-timers with a grin would say, "Let me tell you about the HOA that thought it was in charge." Sarah smiled, sowing seeds of courage, her quiet strength proving that one woman's grit could spark a revolution.